I was a lost 18, 19-year-old kid. I really was, until Mr. James talked to me and got me in officiating. And so I rolled in school, and I think, that very next chance I got, I went to the local association, got into football first, started doing baseball. And for me, I don't want to say it saved my life. I'm not going to go that far, but I've never looked back really about what if I would have done this, what if I would have done that, and really regretted that I left a scholarship on the table because I got into officiating. I was so engrossed with that it just it really transformed my life. So if you're not a people person and you're not approachable, you're going to struggle in both teaching and officiating, in my opinion. When I was teaching, I really never raised my voice. I mean, except for to give instructions you have to use your gym voice in a loud gym. And I think I attribute to that to being on the field. As an official, we don't raise our voice. We're the one bringing everything down, trying to make peace if there's a sideways situation. So, yeah, I just think being a people person is really, really important in both officiating and teaching. You have to be a good listener. First, I would say the extra income. I mean, we're never really going to get rich off doing this unless you happen to make it to the pros or high level college or whatever. I mean, even then, you're not going to get rich, but you will make some decent money. But being a three-sport official, I mean, I bought a lot of dinners for my wife. I paid for a lot of bills, a lot of things that I made with officiating. So yeah, the extra income is really, really good.
And now, Season 2, Episode 24, Letter T, Transformative. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Mark Stroia on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, back with my co-host Nate Acosta for this week's episode of the show.
On this episode, we are covering the letter T and talking with our guests about the transformative nature of officiating.
Our guest is Mark Stroia, a three-sport official of over 35 years. He officiates baseball, football, and ice hockey, and over the past 10 years, he has been involved in the recruitment, training, and mentoring of new officials. In addition, he is a PE and health teacher who developed a sports officiating class that he taught for 10 years until he retired from public education in 2023.
Mark, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the topic of transformative nature of officiating, could you tell us about your officiating journey, how and why you got started, the steps along the way, and what you're doing now?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. So the way I got started in officiating, I was a three-sport athlete growing up: baseball, football, and ice hockey. I played it all the way through high school. I ended up getting actually a football scholarship to go to Ball State. I was an all-state quarterback in high school. And I went to Ball State. I only stayed to my sophomore year for reasons that I'll get into a little bit later. So I kind of found myself 19 years old, out of sports. I enrolled in school back at home. And there was a high school teacher I had, a history teacher. He was also my baseball coach in ninth grade as a JV player. And then he got the varsity job my sophomore year. And so I played for him for 4 years, and we were really close. And he just, we were talking one day, and he advised me. He said, "Why don't you start officiating? You're a three-sport guy. You'd be great at it." So he gave me the connection of the person that schedules his game in our area. So this was back in 1987. I started football in the fall of 87, and then I went into baseball in the spring of 88, and then I added hockey like 2 years later. So, I loved it. I jumped right in. I started doing games. I did games just trying to get my feet wet, taking any game I could at various levels. And then my goal back then was to become a MLB umpire. So I actually went to umpire school in 1994. Okay. So I went to school, but the weird kind of thing with that was I was substitute teaching for a couple of years for the same person at the same school. This guy had a lot of years in, and he had some issues at the end. So I was kind of in for him for 2 years as a sub. So I was all set to go to umpire school and try and make it as a professional umpire. And then the district came to me and said, "Hey, we have the job open for you. You can start in January." So I said, "Well, hey guys, I'm going to this umpire school. So they kicked it around a little bit and said, well, if you're going to go to umpire school for 6 weeks, we're going to give the job to somebody else. So what I did was I still went to umpire school, but back then they had a 2-week school at Wendelstedt. That's where I went. So I went to the 2-week school, but you weren't eligible for a job in pro baseball. But I still learned a ton. I came back. I started working college baseball as well as doing high school football and high school hockey. I did that all the way through the 90s. And then my wife and I, we started having kids. My daughter was born in 2000, my son in 2002. And with our family, my wife's an engineer and I was the teacher. So our roles were kind of reversed. Like I was the one that got the kids off the bus and took them to practice and took them to the dentist. And my wife was the one, working the long hours. And we had just moved from our house we were both 45 minutes from work. So you got to add that on top of it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I scaled really back then. So back then I scaled back in officiating. I got out of hockey altogether, never gave up my Friday night football. I scaled back in baseball and I was, working on my family and my career, for the next good solid 10 or 12 years, but it was always still in my life. And then around 2012, 13, my kids were older. I kind of got back into hockey and then I switched gears from college baseball. And that's when I got into college football. So that brings me to the present time. And currently I work Division II college football in the GLIAC, and I do high school hockey and high school baseball. So, but like I said, I had to scale back a little bit, and no regrets. It's just what I had to do. My wife's always been a supporter of this. She's been by my side. We've been dating since we were both in 10th grade. So
Oh, wow.
officiating has been part of her life as well. So we made everything work, and yeah. So here I am today.
You know,
Uh,
I think that's great, and I think that a lot of times, what happens with officials is we chase this dream of getting to the next level or to the highest level, and a lot of times we set aside family, we set aside career, we set aside all the things that are kind of important to most people, and
right. Yep.
you kind of actually went back. You could have given up on, all that other stuff, and it sounds to me that you kind of chose the family side of things, and you mentioned you scaled back,
Yep.
and I don't know if it's a scale back because obviously, you're still officiating, you're still doing the thing that you love. You just you also took priority, which is family.
Absolutely. And I tell young officials that all the time, or new officials that I try and recruit. I'm always trying to get people into officiating. And I tell them right off the bat, first off, involve your significant other as much as you can. And you have to be able to prioritize because I've seen officiating wreck marriages, wreck relationships because people dive in and they get consumed by it like we can all do easily. I mean, it's just something that we all we got to know the rules. We got to know this. So it's easy to get consumed, but you have to be able to prioritize. And like I said, family and work is like 1A and 1B. Officiating is second. But yeah, so I'm always preaching that to new officials as
Well,
much as I can.
with these new officials, I think the new generation, everybody wants to be a Division I official. Everybody wants to be a pro official.
Right.
And, nobody really talks about just really sticking to the ground, to the roots of officiating, and that's at the interscholastic or youth,
Right.
level. And
Yeah.
it's necessary, right? I mean, that's where the shortage is. We're not
Yeah.
short at the Division I level. And so, I think your story also helps, these young officials. Hey, not everybody's going to be, it's not that you're not capable of
Right.
officiating at that level. Sometimes, you have to prioritize your life over officiating.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I talk to people, I tell them, you know, I was fortunate. I worked the Division II national championship in Dallas, Texas in 2023.
It's awesome.
But when I talk about getting people into officiating, I don't even bring that up. I bring up, picture yourself in a high school game, two rival schools, a packed house, the band's playing. That's where it's at. That's all you need to say. I mean, that's where it's at. And yeah, you don't have to, you know, you're exactly right on Nate with people. They want to move up too quick. Sometimes they don't want to pay their dues. And be the best official at the level you're at. Strive to be the best, like, person at your position in whatever league you're working. And then the promotions will come. in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, some of the lower level games and, high school or even, baseball, football, whatever the sport, they could be the most fun. So don't be too in a hurry to move up.
Absolutely, enjoy the moment when you're at
Right.
every level as you progress, and Mark, I love that you talked about the having a supportive spouse, partner, whatever, because that is so critical, and, when you go to events and award ceremonies and you hear officials talk about their success, one of the first set of people that they thank is their family because
Right.
it's hard to progress and it's hard to reach any level of success if you don't have a support system around you who buys into it because it is a sacrifice and you're gone a lot and you're trying to figure out, hey, have you washed my uniform or have I washed my uniform? All of the things that come with being married to an official, it's a lot, and
It's
I
a
love
lot.
that
It
you
is.
addressed that immediately and kinda gave your wife that early shout out, and I think that that's
Yeah,
important because it's they're kind of the behind the scenes, heroes of officiating sometimes, so,
absolutely.
really, really love that you pointed that out. So before I get into this question, I just want to say ice hockey officials, I respect that so much. I'm a huge hockey fan, and every time I watch hockey, I'm looking at the officials going, I don't understand how they do it because you've got to get out of the way and you have to be agile and you're on these little thin blades.
Yeah,
Just so much respect for ice
yeah.
hockey officials. Coolest
And,
thing
and,
ever.
and you're skating backwards more than
You
you're
are.
skating forward most of the time. Some people are like, I can't even skate forward. I think about skating backwards. So yeah,
Ice ice hockey takes a skill like
yeah,
a skill, very specialized skill that, wow, it's a thing of beauty. Even if you're not a hockey fan, but you love officiating, watch a hockey game for 10 minutes and you'll be like, "Yeah, I don't know if I can do that because it's
absolutely.
impressive." So, Mark, you're the second PE teacher we've actually had on the show over the past couple of letters. So, what were some of the similarities that you saw between teaching and officiating?
Well, first off, I think it goes hand in hand. You have to be a good people person in both officiating and teaching. Number one, you have to come across as somebody that's approachable. So if you're not a people person and you're not approachable, you're going to struggle in both teaching and officiating, in my opinion. When I was teaching, I really never raised my voice. I mean, except for to give instructions you have to use your gym voice in a loud gym. And I think I attribute to that to being on the field. As an official, we don't raise our voice. We're the one bringing everything down, trying to make peace if there's a sideways situation. So yeah, I just think being a people person is really really important in both officiating and teaching. You have to be a good listener. You have to really know how to listen. A lot of times, kids can, my 30 years of teaching, kids can see when you're not listening to them. They really can. They could sense that. And coaches can too. And sometimes, just like on the field, when you're talking to a student, you have to listen to what they have to say. Instead, too many people, teachers are just, giving instructions or giving discipline and not really listen to the other side. So I learned to do that. And on the field, the same way. Sometimes the coach is just frustrated. Maybe they're getting beat and a penalty happens that they know it's a penalty. Maybe it's against them, but they just want to be heard. They just want to maybe vent a little bit. So we need to be good communicators and good listeners in both situations. I believe that's probably one of the most important things in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that's I think the key component of communication, right? I think when we think of communication, we think about the words that we speak, but it's really the listening part, and
Right.
it's I think that is the key component. So I'm glad you brought that up. Mark, what are some of the challenges and rewards of being a three-sport official?
Well, I'm going to start with the rewards first. First, I would say the extra income. I mean, we're never really going to get rich off doing this unless you happen to make it to the pros or high level college or whatever. I mean, even then, you're not going to get rich, but you will make some decent money. Uh, but being a three sport official, I mean, you know, I bought a lot of dinners for my wife. I paid for a lot of bills, a lot of things that I made with officiating. So yeah, the extra income is really really good. And nowadays, I know in Michigan, within the last couple of years, we finally got some of the raises that we really been waiting for, and I think that's due to a shortage of officials, which is nationally. But yeah, so the extra income really comes in handy. The other thing, a reward for me was it kept me in really good shape. So, like when I worked hockey, hockey was probably the sport I was less serious about was when I worked hockey. But you know what? Every time I skate, I'm burning 1,000 calories. So if I do that 4 days a week, that's going to help me in football, which is what I'm trying to excel in. And so, I mean, there was times when, as being a gym teacher, we would be on our feet all day except for lunch. Basically, you're on your feet all day except for lunch. So I would get 10,000 steps in before noon. And then if I had a game on top of it, I'm talking 25,000 steps. That
Easily.
happened a lot. So it kind of was maybe a double-edged sword because as I'm getting older now, I'm feeling the effects of that a little bit. My knees are not like they used to be, but as far as year round, keeps you in great shape. And to do three sports, you have to be in good shape. I mean, to really do a good job and be in position and things like that. And then finally, the last thing is probably just the friends I've met and the places I've been. I mean, most of my friends nowadays are officials. I just played in the golf outing that I help organize, and it used to be a lot of my teacher friends, some of my high school buddies, and it's kind of evolved to out of 70 guys, 70% of is officiating buddies. So you just meet a lot of fantastic people along the way. You get to go to a lot of really nice places. In my league, in the GLIAC, we work in two schools in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which
Oh,
is as pretty as it gets, especially in the fall. So we go there. I've been to Dallas for the national championship. I just been to a lot of places, you know, just really cool places. So, and then I would say some of the challenges with officiating would be just being able to juggle like what we talked about, your career, your family life, and officiating. That can be a real challenge, especially when you're doing it officiating year round. So you have to be really organized. You have to set your calendar well in advance. You have to not take too much, you know, depending on what your family dynamic is. But that could be challenging sometimes. You get people calling you with the shortage of officials. I need a guy here, and maybe that's your day off. And it's like, okay, and you promise your wife that you'll be not working on Friday night so you can go out to dinner, but I got to go do a favor right now. So that can be kind of tricky. Also, uh, just, it's a double-edged sword with it keeps you in shape, but yet it does beat up your body. When I was younger, I never thought twice about getting hit as I'm working behind home plate with a foul ball, or I mean, that has happened so many times. But as I'm getting older, like a couple years ago, I lost my tooth in a hockey game. So I had to teach for a couple days before I was able to get it fixed too. So that was kind of different.
I
Um,
bet.
yeah, and then just the pulled muscles working football. I pulled my calf muscle about 10 years ago on the first play of the game of a semifinal game where I had the state finals the next week. So I had to pull out of the state finals. And fortunately, I got the finals the next year. And then just the countless bumps and bruises you get from working baseball, working behind the batter, foul tips, balls in the dirt, so I'm always beat up here and there. But I guess the older I get, the more I'm kind of like, oh, yeah, this is not fun anymore. But yeah, those are some of the challenges I would say. But the
And I,
rewards are way outweigh the challenges in my mind. So that's why I keep doing it.
and I'm glad you talked a little bit about that extra income because, we've all been around this long enough that we remember the days where you weren't ever supposed to talk about the fact that you make money doing this. And
Right.
we've really had to shift. It's okay to talk about the fact that you're being paid for a service you provide. And
Absolutely.
I think that it was just so taboo for so long to talk about, you do make some money. People are like, "Oh no, we're doing this because we love it." And you are. I mean,
Right.
at your core, you're doing it because you love it, but it's okay to get paid to do something like and
Yeah.
it's okay to talk about that as a reward, as a selling point for why people should officiate. So I'm
Absolutely.
glad you mentioned that.
Well,
Yeah. It's
and because a lot of times too, I think that we always were viewed as volunteers for our communities, and I think people started to take advantage of that just a little
right.
bit. And so now it's like, oh, hey, will you come do this rec league for $10? Well, the going rate's 15.
Yeah.
Well, the league doesn't really have that kind of money. And then they convince 20 folks to go ahead and work for $10 instead of the 15. And so
Yeah.
I think as an industry, we've gotten a lot better at just really providing a service and requesting what we're worth. So
Absolutely. And it's a great recruiting tool too, because when I
Yes.
had my class, I would try and build my class and talk about it and see kids in the hall. And I would talk to them about, hey, you ever think about taking the officiating class? And they kind of look at you like, and then what do you think officials make? And they never really knew, they think, so I would say, step into my office for a minute. I get my marker out and I go on the board and say, here, I mean, the guys that do your baseball games, you're on JV, they're making $65 a game, so they take 2 hours. So how much is that per hour? In the kids' eyes, we get this big. And, I would bring that up in my officiating class. And I'd always tell them, hey guys, I'm not trying to tell you how much money I got because I'm a teacher. I don't have a lot of money, but you could make some money in this, and, you get into officiating, you're in college. If you could fit it into your schedule, I mean, you could really make some good money, especially while you're young, while you're in college with not a lot of bills that could really get you through your college years. And that attracted a lot of people and they had no
absolutely.
idea. Kids know coaching, but what I found out, they know coaching, they don't know officiating. So
They
what I would
don't.
say, like, you want to become an official? And they'd say, yeah, I can do this. And I'd say, of course you can do this. Let's talk, and they all know, well, I was going to maybe come back and coach the ninth grade. I used to play for this school. Well, what about officiating? Let's talk about it. And then they don't know. They never,
Yeah.
no one ever talked to them about officiating. But yeah, I use that a lot to recruit people because they have no idea how much we make. They think, oh, you're working the plate on a baseball game where they pay you $15 and the guy in the bases gets $10. That's what our little league does. And I'm like, no, it's a little different. So, but
And
yeah,
and you get to make your own schedule ultimately,
you can make your own schedule.
especially for
Absolutely.
that college kids. I mean, that was always my recruitment tool with college students was, hey, you got an exam, block your date. You don't
Yeah,
have to, you don't have to worry about getting your shift covered. You just let your
yeah.
assigner know you're not available that day, and you get
No
to
questions asked. Yeah,
no questions asked. You want to go to the lake with your friends that weekend? Block the date.
That's right.
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
and you're gonna make decent money.
right.
And that, I mean, all of that is such a good conversation because you hit the nail on the head, Mark. Kids don't understand that this is a viable option for what to do when you're done playing. It's always, if I'm a player, my options are coach, play. No one talks to them about officiating. And
Nobody
I
talks
think,
about officiating, right?
I think having people who are in schools like you, where you can be like, you can do this, right? Or they're thinking, well, I didn't even know where these officials came from. They just show up
Right. Yeah,
magically. So I think letting them know like this is a viable option. You can make money. You can make a career of it. There are people who do it professionally. I mean,
yeah,
there's so many ways to get into it and so many paths that it can take people
right.
down. So I love that you did that with your students, and that's a great
Yeah,
way to recruit for sure.
yeah. And it's two ways. Like a lot of kids, they could get into it to continue into the being involved in the sport that they love. But also, you don't have to play to be a good official. I know so many people that never played football. They're great football officials. So, a lot of kids have that notion. Like I've never played it. So, but I say, but in class, you're constantly talking to me about the game and like, did you watch Michigan? You watch this and that. So football good enough. You could learn the rest. And then they're like, okay, I never played, but I can officiate. Yeah, come on, let's give it a try. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, Mark, I'm really excited about this. So, we're going to jump into the word of the day, which is transformative. I know you have a story. So, we're in the point of this podcast where we'd love for you to share your story with us about how officiating transformed your life.
Yeah, so really, I mean, I mentioned to you guys that I played. I was a pretty good high school quarterback. I got a scholarship to Ball State. I had some family issues back then, and I ended up leaving halfway through my sophomore year, and I came home. Man, I was just depressed. I had some real family issues, and that's when I was talking with my former teacher. He was kind of a mentor of mine, and and like I said, I was a lost 18, 19-year-old kid. I really was until Mr. James talked to me and got me in officiating. And so I rolled in school. And I think, that very next chance I got, I went to the local association, got into football first, started doing baseball. And for me, I don't want to say it saved my life. I'm not going to go that far, but I've never looked back really about what if I would have done this, what if I would have done that, and really regretted that I left a scholarship on the table because I got into officiating. I was so engrossed with that it just it really transformed my life. And and like I said, I never really looked back and said, what if this, what if that? And I was just so into officiating that it just filled that void, and I never really regretted or anything of my decision. Yeah, so that was just huge for me.
I think what happens, and I too, Mark, have a story, and that's, I think I talk a little bit about it in the letter Z in season one, but I really haven't gone in depth. But going with that, I think what happens is, especially when you're done playing, all you know your entire life is sports, right? It's
Right. Yep.
from the time that you can walk and run, you are either on a soccer pitch, you are out on a basketball court or football field, a baseball diamond, and you go to practice every day. You are with teammates, with coaches. You're constantly being coached and taught something new. And what happens is when you stop playing, it's all gone.
Right.
For
Yeah.
me, I mean, I was not good enough to play at the next level. I was not fast enough or strong enough. I was a football player, but I was a good high school football player. But when that's done, I mean, there's intramurals, there's things like that, but it's not the same.
No. Right.
You're not being coached every day, and so there's something that's missing, and there's something that just, I mean, and you go through that depression, and you go through, it's an identity change because you don't know anything else other than
Right.
sports.
Yep.
And so, how many student athletes out there are looking for something, and they turn to something negative, right? Because they no longer, you know, are themselves,
Right.
and so that's where we lose a lot of our high school kids transitioning to college. They either drop out of college, get into drugs and alcohol, whatever the case may be, and so, man, if we could really talk to our high school kids about, and honestly, I mean, the only 3% of high school students go on to play any level of college sports.
Yep.
So, that other 97%
The chances aren't good.
are good.
Chances aren't good at
So
all. Right.
the other 97% are about to just get everything taken from them. And
Yep.
so how can we really reach the masses at that high school level and just say, "Hey, this is going to happen and this is what you're going to feel," and it's not gonna feel good. So you're gonna
Right.
have 2 options. You can stay involved in sports, and this is how, or you can turn to all the negative things that are out there, and your life's really going to change.
Yep.
So,
Definitely.
and so, man, it's just, I think that, it's, we don't take that approach much either. I think we tell these student athletes, well, keep trying, shoot for the stars. You're going to be a college athlete, and especially in this club
Yeah.
world
Right.
we have now,
Yep.
and the reality is, look, we're going to have 90% of student athletes just down in the dumps and depressed because,
Yep.
their entire identity has just changed.
Absolutely. And for me, like I said, when I left college and came home and quit playing football, I was a business major then. And then once I started officiating, I'm like, wait a minute, I might be working 9 to 5. I can't officiate if I'm working 9 to 5. I changed my degree to phys ed to become, because like I said, sports was my life. And that was a suggestion too of my former coach. I changed to phys ed so I could, teach and that's perfect job for that's right hand in hand with officiating. So and then my mom, she was just worried about me finishing school because she figured I would become an iron worker like my dad and all my uncles. My dad really wasn't involved in my life, but I told her, I said, Mom, I'm not going to become an iron worker because I can't officiate if I'm iron working. So I'm going to finish school. I knew I had to get something in school where I would get off at 3 o'clock so I could officiate. So it all worked out, and so like I said, it just that really transformed me, and so I was just lucky. I'm lucky I found something, and it's been my life for the last 37 years. I don't know what I'd do without it, to be honest with you.
Man, you just as you said that, Mark, I kinda got a little emotional because I think, Nate and I talk a lot about it, and for us, officiating is just a very personal thing and transformed my life. You mentioned it didn't save your life, but it changed your life, and for me, it definitely saved my life in a lot of ways. For Nate, it saved his life as well. And I think that sometimes people don't understand the emotion that's involved with this or how
Right.
important it really is to us because there's
Yeah.
not a lot of you know, avocations or side hustles or whatever you want to call it, where it's so meaningful and it's a deep emotion that we all feel. And it's something that, I'll talk about sometimes and I'll get a little teary. And I don't think people fully understand that because not everybody knows our story. Not everybody knows our background. They don't know what struggles led us to kind of fall in love with officiating and to
Yeah.
fall in love with that officiating family. And it is transformative. And until it's in your bloodstream, I don't think you can really fully understand it, but anybody who tells those stories, and I'm sure it's a high percentage of people who kind of fall into that as far as why officiating is so meaningful to them or how it changed their lives. And everybody's got a story, and I'm
They
always
do. Yeah.
fascinated
Right.
to hear how it maybe rerouted somebody's life or whatever, changed it in a positive way. So
Yeah.
really, really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot. I didn't have really a kind of like a father figure growing up, but somebody I could go to in a when I needed somebody. Now I got officiating brothers everywhere. And I call them brothers because that's what they are. We've been through the battles. We've been through, we're on a field, seven of us, two of us, whatever type of game it is. And it's just us. And it's that bond that we get that people can't understand unless they're part of it. So,
It is family,
yeah,
100%.
100%. Or that coordinator or that assigner that
right. Yeah,
almost that mother or father figure, or
absolutely. Yeah.
or the mentor that takes you under their wing. And so, and it's how about with your officiating classes, are there examples of times that you just saw students transform? Like, did you see anything? And can you give us an example of maybe when you saw something?
Yeah, I have a really good example. So I had my officiating class, and, in the class, there was a good group that signed up for it that wanted to be there. And I kind of wish it was an elective. It wasn't an elective class, but I wish it was just all kids that wanted to be there. But maybe half the class was kids that signed up for it. But then the other was just, we need to find a class for this kid. And they put people in there. So I had kids in there that never really wanted to get on the field, which was fine. But I had this one student, this was probably 3 or 4 years before I retired. And, this kid just was disruptive. I mean, I would sometimes meet him at the door and just say, "Hey, just," and the classroom was right next to the gym, and there was always gym classes going on in the gym. And let's just say we call this kid John, but I would say, "John, just go to the gym. Just go to," and he'd say, "I'm not going to get in trouble." I say, "No, just go to the gym." Because maybe I was doing a lot of lecturing. I just didn't want to deal with them. So I did that for a while. And then, I think he started talking to other people in the class. And then he didn't want to go to the gym. So he would stick around. But this kid's MO was just to be the biggest goof he could be because that's how he got noticed in that. And so as the semester went on, he actually was, I could tell he kind of got into it a little bit, and he was interested. He was answering questions, asking questions. So just kind of fast forward to the end of the semester, he was one of three kids that year that actually registered and got on the field. And this was baseball. So he actually registered, got into the legacy program, which is a mentoring program in Michigan, the MHSAA. He didn't really have any money because a lot of times what I found, especially with baseball, it's expensive. So a lot of kids would be interested, but now it's time to buy your equipment, and it's 500 or 600 on the low end for the cheaper stuff, and kids would disappear because they just didn't have the money, which I would try and get things donated and stuff, but I didn't have enough for everybody. But so we got John on the field, and so I worked his first game with him, and I just told him how proud I was of him, and he just made a total 360. So I found out later his parents were at the first game, and they were just so excited, and I was just there with his parents, and John was getting ready for the game. He couldn't hear what we were saying, but the mom said, "Mr. Stroia, he's gotten cut from everything he signed up for. He's the biggest sports fan in the world, but he never makes the team. He's been getting cut since he's been in the sixth grade. He loves this stuff." And it just made me feel so good
That's
because,
awesome.
he found what he liked. He found something he liked, and he could do. He wasn't good enough to make the teams, but yet officiating, he could do that. And so I work with him, and, he's probably mid 20s now, and he's still on our list. He's still doing games, and he got his car and he's driving to games now. Before he had to get a ride, his mom had to wait for him and all that. But it just made me feel so good because it kind of changed his life. It transformed him. And this was when he was first in my class. He was like a junior. So then his senior year, he was in the class again, and just a totally different kid. And now he's in college. He's making money doing. He added football, and he's loving it. And I just probably for the best feel good story that I've had. And I've had quite a few with getting kids into it that kind of transformed him as well. But for him, yeah, he just loved it, and his parents were so thankful, and yeah, it was just awesome. So yeah,
That's a good story. Like,
yeah,
I love
yeah,
hearing that.
yeah, and it was so funny if I can just talk about this, and then
Absolutely.
now we're doing that first game, and he's working the plate. I'm on the bases, and this is his first game ever. It was only like a seventh grade game, but he was so nervous. He's kind of calling like his strike zone was everywhere, which is kind of expected a little bit. But he was so nervous, he was really getting kind of, and the parents were getting on him a little bit, and they knew that he was, the first time on the field. I had talked to both coaches, and at that level, they're usually real receptive to that. But there were still a couple of parents, so I'm thinking to myself, I got to get him. I got to get him out of these being so nervous. So I went and told him. I said, John. I said, starting next inning, I said, I'm going to stand right behind the pitcher because I was working the bases. I said, I'm going to call the pitches. He says, no, don't do that. You're going to embarrass me. I said, no, listen. I'm going to put both hands on my knees like this, like I'm just in a ready position. I said, when the pitch comes in, if it's a strike, I'm just going to drop my right hand. I go, no one's going to know but me and you. I had to think on my feet, So we started doing that. And he was getting all the balls and strikes were dead on. The parents that were getting on him were saying, you were just nervous. So you're doing great now. This and that. But no one in the whole park knew I was the one calling the pitches. But we brought it up with the assigner afterwards, and he said, you know what? That's perfect. I told him, I said, I hope that's okay. He says, the kid didn't have to worry about the balls and strikes. Now he could work on his timing. He could work on his eye, tracking the ball into the catcher's mitt, everything. So we actually use that now with
That's
some young
awesome.
guys. And he just was like, but it actually worked really good. And we kind of do that to this day with some of the young kids. But I had to think on my feet because he was getting really wound up more than I expected. But it's just kind of a funny story. But yeah, he's doing great now. He's officiating, and there's a couple other, like I do some of these mini clinics of baseball and football, like at different cities. Like I'll go and on a Saturday, we'll do like an umpire clinic for like 4 hours with like youth umpires of that city. And there's a couple kids that I picked out. One kid in particular, a few years ago, I thought he'd been trained somewhere, and I asked him. I said, "Where have you been trained?" He says, "Nowhere. I just want to be a pro umpire, and I watch YouTube videos." I said, "Me and you have to talk." And the kid's only 21 right now, and he's probably in the top 5 balls and strike umpires that we have in our association, and he's going to umpire school next year.
That's
And
awesome.
it was just, I mean, you probably would have got seen along the way, but it's just situations like that that really make you feel good. Because what I want to do, towards the end of my career, ever since I had my class, pretty much, I'm always recruiting, and I want kids to have the experience I did. So I'm always trying to recruit, and I'll help them out. And some of them don't work out, some of them will get into it, and they go to the first game, and then the assigner says, hey, so and so didn't show up and now they're gone. That's going to happen. You got to expect that. But what we're trying to do is mentor them, and for the first 2 years, get them through their first 2 years, because if whatever sport, if they can last for their first 2 years, they'll stay for 32 like I did. The key is getting them through their first 2 years. And that's by mentoring the right way, putting with experienced officials, not throwing 2 young, new officials to the wolves, because all it takes is one coach and, a bad experience, and they're gone. But anyways, yeah, my goal is to just try and find new officials, whether they're younger kids or even older people, maybe get into it for like a retirement job. And I just want them to have the experience I had, because I've had such a good experience at officiating that that's what I try and do.
That's fantastic. Those are just great stories when you hear a kid that was a little lost and kind of goofing off, and
Yeah,
he found his place. Like he
he
found
did. He
something that
found a
he could
spot.
connect
Yep.
with, and um, definitely changed his life because he could have taken a wrong turn at any point. So that's a
Absolutely. Yeah.
fantastic story.
Yeah.
I love that his parents were excited about it too.
Oh, his parents.
There's that
Yeah.
family buy-in again. Now
Yeah.
you've got
Yeah. Right.
parents that are going, yeah, I'll drive him
Yeah.
to that. Like I'm
Yeah.
in.
And then, like I said, with that class I had, I loved it because, like I said, not everyone wanted to get on the field, but maybe not at this point.
Right.
Because there's been people that they're just not mature enough when they're 18, but now when they're 25, they say, "Oh, I took an umpire class and I want to do this now." Now maybe they can do it. But I've had cheerleaders that never wanted to be on the field, but said, "Hey, Mr. Stroy, I really enjoy this class because my dad watches football and he's always yelling about targeting, and now I know the rules of that. I could talk to him about that. I know what he's talking about, and I kind of like the class, and so that makes you feel good." But and then there's those that just hated the class, but they'd hate whatever they were in anyways. But yeah, it was just, I think, in my opinion, that's the way to, get more officials is by trying to integrate it into the schools, make it an elective class. But the difficulty is, you know, you got to find somebody that can teach it, that's knows it good enough. But nowadays they have some of these websites that it's kind of like a individual. You put in, the website, and then kids can pick the sport they want, and then they watch videos and all that, which is still good. But I think that would drum up a lot more officials, especially the younger kids whose careers are going to end soon.
I think
Um,
you just plugged ref reps.
Ref
I
reps,
think
yeah, yeah, right. I did,
Kyle,
yeah, ref
you're
reps, yeah.
you're
I
you're
didn't
welcome.
have that when I was teaching, but
Kyle
that came
Armstrong,
out just when I got out.
You're welcome, Kyle.
Yeah,
Kyle Armstrong from A to Zebras looking for sponsorship. Here we go.
yeah. That I just heard about that the year I was leaving, and I'm thinking, man, I wish I would have had this, but
And it's
I
been
had
interesting.
35 years of experience, so that kind of helped. I had all kinds of stuff, but
That
yeah,
helps a lot. But you hit on a great point when you were talking about the kids that took the class, and maybe they didn't want to officiate, but RefReps has talked a lot about this in the classes that they have of maybe the kid doesn't like it or it's not for them or maybe not right now, but it's developing some empathy for officials and it's
right,
developing, as these kids go and maybe now they're playing sports, but they've taken an officiating class, they're calling their teammates and their coaches on like, wait a minute, that was right. That was holding.
Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Read a rule book. So I think that it's been cool because it's, if nothing else, if they don't sign up, and some won't, it's developing empathy. It's developing respect for what officials do. It helps people understand that it's not as easy as officials make it look.
right,
And I think anytime we can solve some of those problems, we're in a better spot for those people who do sign up to officiate. So I think that
absolutely,
when you talked about that with like the cheerleaders going, yeah, I'm going to tell my dad to stay on the couch and, shut his mouth. That's
yeah,
okay too. Like that's valuable.
yeah. Because when that girl now has children and they're playing, she'll probably be more sympathetic toward the officials, because of what she learned. And
Exactly.
but yeah, I just had people say, "Wow, I didn't know people spent this much time into all this," and it was just
They don't. They don't
kind of
know.
cool.
They
Yeah, they
don't have
don't
any
know. They have
idea.
no clue.
They do not. So, Mark, we have a final question for you, and this is something that we ask all of our guests. The From A to Zebra podcast has a mission each week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can you tell our audience about officiating that accomplishes this mission?
I think the first part, educate, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is kids just they don't know that they could go into officiating. So, however, we can educate them by promoting and recruiting and letting them know that it's not just coaching is an avenue for ex players that you can continue in the sport that you love by officiating. We need to promote that, recruit and just let them know that that's something they could do, whether you played or not. So that's part of the education process. And then the next one would be mentoring. We have to be able to mentor people, get them ready before we turn them loose doing games. I think for the elevate piece of it is just be good examples. Not everyone's going to be an official, but if you're thinking about doing it, or if you're not thinking about doing it, just being respectful at games, being respectful to officials, know what they're going through, know they work hard. When I recruit kids, I tell them, I say, hey, like I told you earlier, picture this, two teams, crosstown teams, you're on the field, it's a packed house, the bands are playing, and you're part of the game. You're getting paid for this. And, so, I always tell kids when I first tell my story is I've only take football, for example, I've only missed 6 football games in the last 37 years, 6 weekends. I was on my honeymoon for one weekend and then I had a surgery. So I missed one there, then I missed 5 when I had a minor surgery several years ago. Other than that, I've had some kind of football game every weekend for 37 years. So, I talk to them and say, you played, right? You know how you feel when you play, you get the butterflies and you're ready for the game and you're all excited. I feel like that when I have a game to officiate. Maybe not as much, but I get the butterflies. I look forward to the game. It's almost the same feeling. And what a great feeling that is, if you're a sports fan, no matter what sport you're doing. So it's exciting. I mean, it doesn't matter what level you're doing. You just need 2 teams. Every game is the most important game to the players playing that game that day. So it should be the most important game to the official as well. So along with that comes excitement, being prepared. And again, they're paying me to be on the field to do this. This is something that I love. So it just doesn't get any better than that. So
That's great. All right. Mark Stroia, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was great getting to visit with you. Great getting to meet you for both of us. It was excellent. And appreciate your service as an official coming from the interscholastic world and everything that you've done there in 3 sports and your collegiate experience as well. You have a lot of knowledge, and I'm so glad that you were an educator and really had the opportunity to share your knowledge of officiating with the kids that you taught. I think that that's something that's really special. So thank you for your service in all different forms and fashions, and thanks for taking time out to be with us on the From A to Zebra podcast.
thanks for having me, guys. I had a great time. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yep, really good stuff. So thanks for joining us. And for our listeners, again, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. See you next time.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.